Greetings, it is your terror from beyond the cosmos, the Cosmic Squid, and today we're going to be reading 5 scary encounters from the good people over at Reddit's Let's Not Meet. Each story you hear will be credited to the original story on the subreddit, so feel free to look them up for yourselves if you want to read along with me. And please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel as it helps with the algorithm. Without any further ado, let's begin. This happened when I was about 12 or 13. For important context, I lived in an apartment complex that was 2 sets of rows, each row with 4 apartments. I lived in the apartment to the closest street of the one row and had 2 cousins that lived in the apartment at the very end of the row in the back. I would hang out with them just about daily. We were very into soccer at the time, and we would walk to a park about 4 or 5 streets along with some of the neighborhood kids and play soccer there. Now I say neighborhood kids, but it was a big group of about 15 kids total, and the ages ranged from about 10 years old all the way to 17. One of my 2 cousins was a 17-year-old, which is why my parents allowed me to go without their supervision. So on this day, like usual, we made our way to the park. Some of us would walk, some of us would ride scooters or skateboards. I had my bike that day. We get to the park and start playing. About halfway through our game, my parents drive by and they call me from our car. They tell me they're going to the store and to wait for them. Okay, no big deal. I figured they must want to go somewhere else after, and it's easier to pick me up from the park than for me to wait back at the house. Of course, this doesn't make any sense because it's 4 streets distance, but at the time, to my 12-year-old mind, it was perfectly logical. We keep playing for about another hour, and then we get closer to sunset. More and more kids start making their way back to their house. When my cousins wanted to leave, they asked me if I was ready, and I said my parents told me to wait for them here, so they left and I stayed behind. Eventually, it was just me. No big deal. I'm familiar with the neighborhood. I have my bike and the energy of a 12-year-old. So I start riding my bike up and down the street, just killing time. At this point, it hasn't occurred to me that if my parents wanted me to wait for them at the park, they wouldn't want me to wait past sunset. Eventually, I get impatient and hungry, but not wanting to get grounded for disobeying my parents, I kept waiting. Except, instead of waiting at the park, I crossed the street and was just waiting there. After a few minutes, a car drove up and stopped next to me. Nothing scary yet. There's a stop sign there, so I don't really pay it much mind, except when it drove away, I realized the car looked weird. It was old and boxy, like an 80s car. But what stood out was that it looked spray-painted gray. It was definitely not real car paint, or done by any professional. I don't know if someone who stole a car would be dumb enough to draw that much attention to it. Or if the look was intentional, but you could tell it was just spray painted all over. Anyway, it drove away and I kept waiting. Annoyed now, the car comes back from the other side of the street. I noticed it because it was hard to ignore at that point, but my survival instincts are still not kicking in. Maybe they were lost, or just wanted to turn around doing a U-turn since the park is just a big square. Going around it and coming back is easy enough to do. A few minutes go by, they drive up again and again and stop at the stop sign. This time, I'm starting to get nervous. So, I look at the car, 2 men inside, very scruffy looking, unkempt beards, unkempt hair, dirty faces, stains on their shirts. They look at me, they both smile at the same time. They both look at each other, smile even bigger, and the creepiest smile I've ever seen someone do in this way, then drove away. Their smile creeped me out so much that I was now on high alert. In particular, I was watching the other side of the park, where they would come from if they went around again like they did the first time. Sure enough, they did. This also means they were now on the same side of the street as me. So as soon as I saw the car, I jumped on my bike and rode as fast as I humanly could. I could hear one yelling something, but honestly, don't know what it was. I was too busy riding for my life. I could hear the car catching up, but I was too scared to even turn around. I somehow made it to my street and ran into the building. But I didn't want them seeing where I lived, since my apartment would have been the one visible from the street. So I went to the back, because my cousin's apartment, behind my cousin's apartment, and hid there. My reasoning was if they followed me inside the building, they would see me knocking on the door and get me before anyone answered. Worth noting, if it wasn't obvious, this was before cell phones. I waited for what felt like a few hours, but was probably only about 20 minutes or so before I got enough courage to make the short walk down the row of apartments to mine. I tried the door. It was unlocked. So I went inside, and my parents were there, sitting on the couch, watching TV. They asked me how our game was, completely nonchalantly, and I questioned them and asked them why they didn't pick me up. They both looked confused. They asked me why they would tell me to wait there instead of home, because it's 4 streets different, and I had my bike. Once they said that, it did make more sense, but to this day, I swear they told me to wait up there for them. They explained that they drove up. They told me they were going to leave the door unlocked for me in case I got home before they did. In my excitement of the game, I must have completely misheard them. I simply went to my room after that, never telling them about it, because as a dumb kid, I knew that if I said something they wouldn't let me go play soccer anymore. And that was clearly more important than my physical well-being. I never saw those guys or that car ever again. Now, I look back on it now, and it doesn't matter how fast I was pedaling my bike, they were in a car. They should have and could have called out to me if they wanted to. So I don't know what their intentions were, but if they were just having a laugh at my expense, if they were trying to scare me, or if they actually had something darker in mind. But I do think back on that day now and get chills every time I realize how much different my life would be right now if they had caught me. So, to the 2 creepy men in the spray-painted car, let's not meet again. This story happened to me in 2022 when I was around 24 years old. For a bit of context, I am non-binary, assigned female at birth, but let's say I look very feminine. At the time, I was studying in Paris and renting a room in the house of the mom of my boyfriend at the time, in a city that was more than an hour away from Paris, but 20 minutes from Versailles, another important city in France. It was in winter, during school break I think, and I was going out in Paris to see a longtime internet friend for the first time. She turned out to be a very toxic and problematic person who I'm not in contact with anymore, but the story is not about her. I must say that I have a rather petite frame because of an eating disorder I was dealing with since I was a child, and I've always looked much younger than my age. Even these days, I need to show my ID when I want to buy alcohol. On the day of my encounter with my friend, I dressed casually with a shirt. Our encounter went very well, but since I lived far away and planning to go to my boyfriend's house later, I had to leave before midnight because the public transportation would become very scarce after 10 p.m. and I had around 2 hours of transit to get there. Unfortunately, I didn't leave early enough, so I managed to get a train until Versailles, but would have to wait almost an hour to get to the bus to the nearest city from my boyfriend's house, where he would then pick me up with his car. While I was waiting at the train station, I noticed a group of bus drivers who were smoking and talking to each other. I approached them to ask which one of them was going to drive the bus to insert name of the city closest to my boyfriend's house. And one of them, a small man with gray hair, who was probably in his late 40s, early 50s, told me that it was him. He noticed my shirt and said that I must be freezing, so he offered me to go heat myself in the bus and wait until the time of departure. I gladly accepted, as I was indeed freezing. And while he was walking with me to the bus, which was parked in a very dark corner with no lights, he got very close to me and started to act very familiar with me, asking me about where I live and where I was going and such. I was feeling uneasy and uncomfortable, but I was raised to be polite, and I've always been a people pleaser, so I answered all his questions with as little detail as possible until we reached the bus. He opened the door for me, and while all my instincts were screaming at me to not go in that bus, I ignored them and got in anyway. I sat in the front of the bus, where there was a bit of light, but mind you, I'm black, and even in the dark, it would have been very difficult for anyone to see me besides the other bus drivers who saw me leave with the driver. No one knew I was on that bus. Anyway, the second I got in the bus, things got even weirder. He threw his lit cigarette away and got in the bus with me as well. All while telling me a bunch of anecdotes about the bus, about how the bus was actually designed to transport the French football team, and how there was a huge table and even a bathroom at the back of the bus, and that I should come in the back of the bus with him to see. He suggested me twice to come in the back of the bus, where there was absolutely no light, and this scared me even more, so I texted my boyfriend, "Might no come tonight. Weird bus driver. Call me ASAP," while ignoring the bus driver's rambling. Then he came back to the front of the bus and stayed in the corridor blocking my way. He talked about random things I don't remember, and all the time his eyes were fixated on me, especially on my phone that was in my hand and around my knee/thighs. All the time I was praying for my boyfriend to see my message and call me, and when he finally did, I breathed a sigh of relief. The bus driver must have seen the face of my boyfriend on the screen of my phone, because he took a step back and told me that he was going to smoke another cigarette outside. I answered my phone, and I answered my phone and told my boyfriend everything that was going on, while looking out the window to keep an eye on the and he was far enough away. I ran to get out of the bus, only to discover, in shock and horror, that he locked the door. I was trapped on that bus, and no one knew where I was, except my boyfriend, the creepy bus driver, and the other bus drivers who saw me leave with him. Still on the phone with my boyfriend, I went back to where I was previously sitting and saw through the window that the creepy bus driver was coming back. When he saw me on the phone, he left and locked the bus door again. He did this circus back and forth a total of 3 times, locking the bus behind him every time. But at last, he stayed near the bus, so I hang up with my boyfriend and decide to text him instead. At some point, I sat on another seat to keep an eye on the creepy bus driver, and through the window I saw and heard an elderly woman ask him if the bus was going to city nearest to my boyfriend's house, and he deliberately lied to her, telling her that it would be another bus. At this point, I was freaking out, frantically texting my boyfriend that I was going to die and the bus driver would do terrible things to me, then kill me, and throw my body away. It was at this moment that the bus driver went back into the bus and locked the door again, where we were supposed to leave in less than 10 minutes, and suddenly, something finally snapped in my brain. I got up and tried to maintain a calm appearance and lied to him about how I need to go back to the train station to go to the bathroom. He told me that there was a bathroom in the bus. Then I lied again, saying that I needed some snacks from the vending machine. He hesitated and finally accepted to let me go. But before he did, he pretended twice that the button to the doors wasn't working, and at this point, I didn't care about hiding my distress anymore. I told him that if he couldn't open the door, I'd pick the emergency hammer to break the door, and suddenly, the button was working again. I bolted out of the bus and took the deepest breath of cold, fresh winter air I've ever took. I've never been in prison, but I imagine that is what it would feel like to be released from prison. I then ran up to the train station, hid behind a vending machine, and eventually I felt safe. I bursted into tears. I called my boyfriend back, and he told me that he called his sister, who lived in Versailles, to let her boyfriend would come and pick me up. While I was trying to calm myself, guess who I saw coming in the train station? The creepy bus driver. He was acting like he was looking for something, or rather, someone. And that, likely, me. And that was likely me. I hold my breath and wait for him to leave and cry some more, because I realized at that moment I was his prey, and I was right about his bad intentions. Finally, the boyfriend of my boyfriend's sister came and picked me up and took me back to where I lived. I couldn't sleep for that night or the following days. My insomnia worsened. I made signaling to the bus company, but since he wasn't the usual driver for them, nothing was done and I didn't ever receive an answer. I'm very grateful for everyone who helped me that night. I know that it has been said before, but let me say it again as a reminder. Trust your guts. Trust your instincts. They're never wrong. Also, being polite with creeps that make you feel like uncomfortable, unsafe, or uneasy. Thank you for your time and attention. Stay safe and have a nice life. P.S. Sorry for all the possible mistakes. It is currently past 5 a.m. and I've been writing for more than an hour. And I'm fluent in English, but it's not my first language. Okay, I want to start by saying this actually happened. This isn't some creepy story or something I made up. I still have trouble sleeping alone because of it. Even now, years later, at 27, I check every closet and lock every door at least 3 times before bed. So yeah, here's why I don't stay at home alone anymore. I was 16, almost 17, female, living with my mom and little brother Ryan, like 7 at the time. My mom worked night shifts at a nursing home, so I was usually the one watching Ryan when she was gone. Since he was younger, he'd be asleep by 8, and I'd just do my thing, watch TV, scroll on my phone, eat junk food, typical teenager stuff. We lived in this little 1-story house on the edge of some woods. It wasn't totally isolated, but there weren't many neighbors nearby either. I used to love having the house to myself at night, until all of this happened. So the first time I noticed something weird, it was small. I was in bed around 11, scrolling through my phone, when I heard this shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet on the carpet. I froze. Ryan was asleep. My mom wasn't home. I sat there, holding my breath, listening. It was quiet for a few seconds, and then I heard it again. A soft, scuffling noise, like someone was moving really slowly through the living room. I grabbed my phone and crept out of my room, my heart pounding. I checked the front door, locked, the windows, locked. Nothing looked out of place, but then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The hall closet was open, just a crack. We never left the door open, ever. I stood there for a second, my whole body on edge. I just wanted to turn around and go back to my room, but my dumb decided to check. I pulled the door open fast, nothing, coats and shoes. I remember laughing at myself. I was just being paranoid. Still, I locked the closet door before I went back to bed. A few nights later, I woke up out of nowhere. At first, I didn't know why. Then, I realized I could hear breathing. I was laying there completely still, my whole body locked up in fear. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside my room. I grabbed my phone, my hand shaking, and turned on the flashlight. I shined it around. Nothing. The room was empty. The closet was closed. I barely slept the rest of the night. After that, I started feeling weird all the time, like I was being watched. Like whenever I had my back turned, someone was just out of sight, peeking around the corner. I told my mom, but she just brushed it off. And then, about a week later, she woke me up after coming home early from work. She looked off. She asked me why the back door was unlocked, and I assured her that I'd locked it, and she told me it was unlocked. And she just had to lock it. I knew, without a doubt, that I had locked that door the night before, but I didn't argue. On that night, I was on edge. I kept my bedroom door locked, and my phone in my hand, just in case. I woke out to more breathing, and just like that, gut feeling that someone's watching me. My whole body went cold. I sat up, barely breathing, and listened. I noticed my closet door was open again, which was also weird. I turned on my flashlight just in time to see it swing open another inch. That's when I saw him. I swear to you, there was a man crouched inside my closet. Skin pale as hell, greasy and matted. He was too thin, like me. He was too thin, like he hadn't eaten in weeks, and he was grinning at me. I don't even remember getting out of bed. One second I was staring at him, The next, I was slamming my door shut, running into Ryan's room. Ryan woke up crying as I grabbed him and ran out of the house, my phone already dialing 911. The cops got out there fast. They found him still in my closet. Turns out he had been living in our crawl space for weeks. He had gotten in through a loose vent in the basement and had been sneaking into the house at night, watching us sleep, taking food when we weren't looking. But the worst part, when they pulled him out, they found something tucked behind my coat, a knife. The police said he was probably waiting for the right moment. I try not to think about what would have happened if I hadn't woken up that night. I swear this actually happened and with me to this day. So, to the man in my closet, let's never meet again. I've wanted to share this story for a few months, and being as that it's currently 4:30 and I can't sleep because I still have residual fear that someone is lurking in my apartment, I thought I would hop on here and share. To set the tone, I bartended and had an awful night at work. I have thicker skin and can handle myself relatively well, but I had been sexually harassed by a man at the bar I worked at earlier that night. After he was kicked out from the establishment, I decided to stick it out. I even called my dad and talked to him, and we agreed that as long as I was physically safe and emotionally ready to finish my shift, I should, so I did. My boyfriend waited up for me in our shared ground-level apartment despite having worked a full day himself, because I was really upset about the comments made to me earlier in the night. To help visualize, we were laying in bed, and our bed is in the middle of the room against the back wall, and we were laying with our heads where our feet normally were. The TV was no longer playing anything, but was still on the media screen. Hulu, Netflix, HBO, those types of options, but nothing playing. He had his hand on my back, and I had just fallen asleep. I could tell by his breathing. I was scrolling on my phone, finally allowing the discomfort of the nights earlier to fade. Then I heard it. The faintest word or words. Hello? I froze. I felt the milliseconds within the second expand. In a matter of moments, my eyes darted to the TV, to my boyfriend, to my phone, and I thought, or more desperately hoped, that I had experienced some type of auditory hallucination. That I was more tired than I realized. Then I heard it again, clear as day, coming from the hallway. Hello? But it was not loud, it was low, quiet. Checking to see if I was asleep, it felt like reflecting. All at once, I realized I could see a figure in the hallway. All at once, I realized the voice was coming from a person who did not belong in my home. I had not forgotten that feeling. The time of break in the clock was 4 o'clock. It's currently 4:44 a.m. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've fallen asleep before 4 a.m. since this incident, and or have woken up around 3 a.m. if I do fall asleep before 4. To make sure everything is locked, hence this post. I can't sleep. Anyways, I screamed with all my heart and screamed. My boyfriend jumped up, awake, confused, yelling. He threw open the bedroom door, and there was the intruder, standing and staring in the darkness. We didn't know what he wanted. We honestly still don't. My boyfriend pushed him and told him to leave. It was a Saturday night. We live in a 25-minute walk from the bars, which may seem far, but isn't as far as you think. We both assumed that he had the wrong apartment until he coldly, calmly said, "I'll leave," and turned around, not towards the front door, but towards the sliding glass patio door that has an exposed patio. He slipped out so suddenly, so quickly, and hopped my 4-foot fencing. We decided not to call the police because I was hysterical, confused, and in that moment convinced myself all they had was the wrong apartment. It wasn't until we talked about the situation more that people make it clear that there was something more nefarious afoot. So, to the person who broke into my apartment, let's not meet again. Please. This happened some years ago during my sophomore year at the University of Michigan. It was during finals week and I was down on campus studying for the multiple exams that I had that day. After studying in a local coffee shop, RIP Espresso Royale, I decided to hunker down in one of the academic buildings, Mason Hall, to use the computer lab/printers. First, however, I needed to make a detour to the bathroom. As finals had started and lectures had ended, the campus was in a liminal state. Everywhere was empty except for the bustling main study areas. Thinking I could use this to my advantage, I took the elevator to the 4th floor, mostly classrooms, to use the bathroom that I thought would be the quietest. Blasting music in my earbuds, I walk in to see that it appears empty, and I hop into a stall to do my business. Everything is going well as I scroll on my phone, at this point having to put the earbuds away. Then I notice commotion 2 stalls to my right of the stall opening. Not odd, right? Just another student who had the same idea as me. After an weirdly long minute or so, I finally see a figure pass my stall. He walks around the exit in this U-shaped room, only to return after what sounded like getting a view of the sink side of this room. Finishing up in my stall, I then watch this man enter the stall diagonal to me, hold the door at a 45-degree angle open, and peer around at me. Now, I'm sitting there just trying to process the middle-aged man seemingly trying to peep at me. I tried to ignore him and just wait him out. He just stayed and staring. He then began shifting around as if trying to adjust his view. Annoyed, I ended up saying, "Is there something I can do for you?" Hoping to get him to leave. Nope. He still sits there peering around this door. I then say, "What the are you doing?" No response. Just his glare. At this point, he begins shifting around the stall, entering other random stalls, and roaming area in between both sets of stalls, the whole time looking at me through the crack of the door. At this point, my anger has turned into fear. Fear to open the stall and come face to face with whoever is brazen enough to do this. Something about his movements and unrelenting stare made me feel like I was some type of prey to him. Around this time, I began contemplating calling someone or calling DPSS. Thankfully, though, someone then walks into the bathroom. The creep then immediately leaves the stall he's posted up in and leaves the room as I can hear him open and close the door. Hoping he's gone, I begin to put my bag to then hear the doors open, close, then open again as if someone had just walked in to instantly leave. In the moment, and looking back, I'm pretty sure this was the creep coming back, yet leaving when he saw the other student at the sink. As I hear the sink turn off, I recognize that this is my best chance to get the hell out of there. Walking out with the student, I didn't mention the experience, and am just focused on getting out of that restroom. My plan was to go down one floor to the third and call DPSS. I figured that I had to report this guy in case he tried to pull this again, and assumed the police would want to meet me at the scene. Flustered, I head down. Thankfully, there was no sign of him. Coming out the doors of the north stairwell, I plop down on the bench, take a little breather, and then begin dialing the number. Yet, before I could hit call, I see the creep walk through the same stairwell I came from. He's at speed walking pace. Right as he sees me, though, he stops outside the doorway. He then begins a far calmer and casual walk down the hall past me. As he does, he stares at me and peers into empty classrooms. As he goes down the hall, I see him round a corner to the other hall on this floor. The layout is a T-shape. Spooked, I spring up and begin jogging down the stairs. As I descend, I call the police. I explain the whole situation to the dispatcher as I move swiftly down the stairs and down the hall to the main lobby of the building. Being on the first floor makes me feel far better as there is a decent crowd. I end up sitting below the staircase in the lobby next to the vending machine area. I finish my call and am told to wait for an officer to arrive. I sit there relieved, being around other people. Thoughts of the creep's intentions racing through my mind, but, like clockwork, I see him again. I get a good view of him this time, as I am a bit calmer. He had a beard and wore work boots, cargo shorts, and a tucked-in t-shirt. Not a normal look for someone his age roaming around a college campus. He didn't immediately spot me thanks to the crowd. As he walks down the hall from some stairs I had just ran down, he stops at the vending machine area, looking around. I bow my head and watch through my preparatory vision in an attempt to blend in more. After about a minute of him scanning the room, he walks away. Shortly after, the cop arrived. He essentially tells me that there's no way he'll be able to find this guy, but he'll take a look in the bathroom anyway. Annoyed, I take his card and leave. I end up taking a convoluted route to my undergraduate library through the grad library. My hopes being to prevent the creep from seeing me in a more open dive. As I get to the undergrad lobby, I sit down staring at the door, fully expecting the creep to walk in again. Thankfully, he makes no such appearance. I end up running into my roommate, who jokes I almost got, and then sat down to my remaining few hours to try and fail to focus on studying. To the random creep who stalked me throughout the entirety of Mason Hall, let's not meet again. This has been your Terror from Beyond the Cosmos, the Cosmic Squid, and thanks for listening. I'll be posting Let's Reads twice a week, so hit that notification bell in order to stay up to date on our journey to 100 subscribers. So you don't forget, like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you soon.